Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we are going on with these various arayot, these oh gosh, laws concerning incest of various kinds and the punishments that go along with them. It's not the first time we're actually dealing with this kind of list. But it reminds me of a joke I heard, which is probably dated very much, about this elderly woman who used to go to church and she refused to read the Bible because it gave her too many bad thoughts. So it must have been referring to this particular section that we're talking about. But it just goes to show you that, the ability to think in various kinds of ways when it comes to sexuality, nothing new there under the sun, that's for sure. So here we go. So this is such a great example of the Torah preaching or that underlining message of the Torah of doing what doesn't come naturally. Because all these kinds of things, these were things that the Canaanites were practicing, and which God is saying this is one of the reasons they no longer could live in the land of Israel, because they were doing these sorts of things. So, the ish asher yishkav et kalato, and a man who sleeps with his, I believe this is daughter-in-law. I believe that's what it refers to. Man who sleeps with his daughter-in-law. Mot yumtu shnehem, both of them shall die. Tevel asu, they did tevel. Jastra translates tevel. One of its translations is defilement. They have committed defilement. Demehem bam, their blood is on their heads. They're, in other words, it's the way the Torah speaks of saying that one is guilty of a capital offense. What's interesting is that this word tevel is certainly related to a word tavlin. Tavlin means spices, and we're going to see how Rashi handles this and how the idea of spices is that what it does is it alters the flavor of food by mixing the spice with the food itself, and it alters it. So tevel, right? Asu. And Rashi translates tevel as ganai, disgrace, disgrace. Lashon acher, another interpretation. Meval belim, and this is probably also where the word tevel comes from. Levalbel means to mix up. He mixes up, they have mixed up zerah ha'av, the seed of the father, bezerah haben, with the seed of the son. So, kala, daughter-in-law. Okay. Ve'ish asher yishkav et zachar. So this is the verse that is a very troubling verse for people. Ve'ish asher yishkav et zachar, a man who lies with a male. So a man who lies with a male. Mishkavei isha, the lyings of a woman. To'eva asu, they have committed to'eva. So to'eva, I think it's a hard word to translate. There's a classic translation or explanation in the Gemara, where the rabbi says to'eba, he makes a mistake in this, right? Makes a mistake. But I think it seems to me from the context that I've seen this word, because it is not just used here, it is used in other contexts as well, having nothing to do with sexuality. But toeva, something like disgusting. That's the way it's understood. Mot yumatu, they shall surely die. Dmehem bam, their blood is on their heads. And I know, of course, that people who are homosexual clearly have serious, serious problems with this verse. Let me just go through the Rashi and I'll dwell on it a little bit. Mishkaveh Isha, right at the bottom here. And this is from Sanhedrin Nunhe. Machnis, so he inserts. So Rashi's actually discussing the actual act itself. Kemichshol bishvoferet, like the stuff for painting the eye, the brush used for putting on eyeliner, bishvoferet, into the tube. So I'm not going to be able to get out of this easily, right? I mean, it's there, and it offends people, I realize, but I want to point out what it isn't saying. It's very explicit, and Rashi is very explicit about what we're talking about.
Brooks and Myers wins 99% of.
Please mute.
If you're hit by a truck, call lawyers with a 99% win rate.
Call.
Thanks. Okay. That was the little elf climbing in there. Okay. All right. So what I wanted to say is this speaks specifically about the physical act. It doesn't condemn people of the same gender loving one another. And the truth is that it isn't specifically necessarily this, it's sexuality in general that the Torah wants us to act in a modest way. And so adultery is the one that's mentioned in the Ten Commandments. It's trying to help us as human beings to recognize the sanctity and the miracle that human sexuality allows to happen. And the Torah, of course, and Judaism does not condemn sexuality, but it wants to make sure that it's done in a limited kind of way and also in a modest kind of way, and not to be selfish about it, not to just be self-satisfying over it. So Judaism does permit contraception. We've talked about this before. It only prohibits male contraception, but it does allow women to practice contraception. And there may be, I mean, there's obviously a great deal that could be said about it, which I'm not going to say. But the thing I really want to stress is that it is not saying that a man, love another man. What it's prohibiting strictly is the act of sex, the sexual act. And I think that what happens is that people condemn, right? People who are homophobic condemn two people of the same gender loving one another. And I don't feel that the Torah is condemning that. And the truth is that in the context of everything else that you will see in this passage, the Torah is clearly trying to tell us to be modest, whether it's heterosexuality or homosexuality. We need to be conscious and be able to control that element within us. And the truth is, I think, if I may say it, and hopefully not be offensive, loving a person doesn't depend on being able to have sex with them. I think there are quite possibly many happily married couples, heterosexual couples, where there's not necessarily any close sexual activity going on. But the Torah is not, and the Rashi is making it clear, not condemning hugging, not condemning kissing, not condemning physical closeness. It's only condemning this specific act. And I don't know if this is helpful. I certainly, of course, hope that it is, but obviously I don't expect everybody to agree with me, but at least I'm trying to base it on what I feel is the evidence here. I'm going to move on, unless somebody wants to make a comment. Okay. Ve'ish asher yiten shchovto bivhema. And a man who places literally it means his lying in an animal, right? I believe this is bestiality, motumat. He shall certainly be put to death, or he shall certainly die. Okay. Ve'et habehema taharogu, and along with the animal you shall kill. Now, laharog is to kill. Mot yumat is a description of what will happen. So if I say mot yumat, it means he will certainly die. Now, certainly within Jewish law, traditionally, it is understood as a capital offense. But I can tell you, of course, that the way the Torah is putting it is interesting. It's interesting. And I'm not, one thing I am aware is that the Jewish law in general is really feels uncomfortable about committing capital punishment. So, okay, let's just go on here. Let's find it. Here we go. Sure, just so I've got the right place. Okay, nope. Let's go. All right, onwards. I was just thinking about the fact that okay. Oh, am I in the right place? Forgive me. Nope. I skipped a verse. So let me go back to verse 14. Ve'ish asher yikach et isha ve'et ima, and a man who takes a woman and her mother, zima, obscenity, it is an act of obscenity. And look at this. Here it now says specifically the nature of the capital punishment. Ba'esh yisrufu to ve'en, right? In fire they shall burn him and them, v'lo tiyeh zima betochachem, so that there is no obscenity among you. And we have a good Rashi on this. Okay? So, Yisrufu oto ve'etin. They shall burn him and them. Sanhedrin, the analysis. I'atayacholomar. You can't say, right? Ishto harishona. You can't, when he engaged or married the first woman, why would she be put to death? Right? Right? But Ishto Harishona Yisrufu, that they should commit to the fire the first woman. Shahare Nasa Beheter. He married her. It's perfectly permissible. He didn't do anything wrong when he married her. Velon Esara Alav. She only became forbidden to him, Ela Isha Ve'ima, when it was a woman and her mother. Aktuvin kan, which is written here, shtehen. So, in other words, why do we say both of them? It seems totally unjustified that we should be killing and committing to the fire the first one. So, okay, so Ella. Sorry, I want to make sure I found it. Okay, uh, here we go. So, forgive me, Nesra Alav. Ella, but we have to understand, Isha ve'ima haktuvin kan, when it refers to a woman and her mother written here in this verse, shtehen le'isur, they both have to be forbidden. It can't be a situation where he simply marries a woman, right? When he gets into this relationship, ab initio, it has to be forbidden. Okay. Shinasa et chamoto ma. So what's it referring to? It's when he marries his mother-in-law and her mother. So in other words, the very initial marriage has to be forbidden. And of course, if he's marrying his mother-in-law, that is already forbidden. So it is not what you think as it comes across. But after careful looking at this and reasoning it out, we realize that it's a limited case where the very first engagement that he has is already forbidden. V'yesh mirabotenu she'omrim, and there are those of our rabbis who say, Ein ken ela chamoto, that what it's referring here to is simply his mother-in-law. Umahu et hen. So why is it saying et hen? Okay, this word et hen. Why is that there? Because it doesn't seem necessary. Et achat mehen. And what it refers to is one of them. So when it says et him, it doesn't mean both of them. It means one of them. Et achat mehem. In other words, it's looking at this word et hen as being an abbreviation. Velashon Yevani, and to support this, we realize that in Greek, hu hen achat. The word hen in Greek means one, right? So it hen means one. Interesting, right? I mean, that's sort of a very curious way of interpreting by saying we understand the Hebrew here to actually be referring to a Greek word. So some stuff to think about, some stuff to ponder there. So we read the next one, the next verse, which talked about bestiality, and it says, "Ve'et habehema taharogu," and you shall also kill the behema, the animal. Im adam chata, but if the person, right, the human being, committed a sin, behema machata. How can you say that the animal sinned? Right? The man was conscious. He knew what he was doing. An animal, you can't expect that sort of thing from an animal. An animal acts by instinct, right? Ella. So what's the reason? Mipnei sheba'u la'adam takala al yada. The reason why she is put to death is because a offense a man committed an offense through her. She was the agent by which this offense took place. Lefichach amar hakatov, and for this reason, Scripture states, tisakel, she shall be stoned. Kal v'chomer. So if this is true for an animal who was the cause of someone committing an offense, a serious offense, and the punishment or the consequence is death, kal v'chomer, how much the more so, la'adam, when it comes to a human being, sheyodea lahavchin ben tov lara, who knows how to make a distinction between something good and something bad, in other words, between good behavior and bad behavior, the gorem ra'a l'chavero, and causes his fellow to do something wicked. La'avor avera, to commit a transgression. Committing a transgression is something wicked, something wrong. And if a human being does that, if we see the consequences for an animal, imagine what the consequences are for a human being that leads another person astray. Kiyotse badavar, another inference, right? What comes out of this? Ata omer, you say, avod tovedun, you shall surely destroy et kol hamakomot, all those places. It's referring to places where idol worship took place, that those places need to be destroyed. This is in Deuteronomy, Varim chapter 12. Hare Varim kal v'chor. Likewise, the situation is a matter of all the more so. Ma ilanot. If you say about trees, we're talking about trees that were worshipped. She'enan ro'in, they're not capable of seeing. Ve'enan shomim, they aren't capable of hearing anything. Al shebat takala al yadam. But because these trees were a means by which an offense became committed, Amra Torah, the Torah has stated, Hashchet, you shall destroy, Sarof, burn, V'chale, and end up, right, cause to cease, period. Hamate et chavero, one who causes his neighbor to turn aside, mider chayim, from the way of life, the darchei mita, to the ways of death, alakchat kama v'chama, how much the more so. Interesting. It is such a severe warning about the effect we have on one another and how careful we need to be. And in some ways, I think this is, an application of the idea that we're created in the divine image and that we need to recognize that and recognize the divine image in one another and realize that when we are causing that divine place to be destroyed by having that person turn to wickedness, terrible, terrible consequences. So, the isha, and a woman, asher tikrav el kol behema, the riva, and a woman who draws near to any animal, liriva, in other words, basically to mount her, ota, to engage in sexual relations with her. Haragta et haisha. Here it does say harag, right? It says you shall kill et haisha, the woman, ve'et habehema, and also the animal. Mot yumatu d'mehemba. They shall certainly die. D'mehemba. They are guilty, right? They've committed a mortal sin. Their blood is on their heads. So let's see here. Okay. On to the next one. These are all things that they were doing, that the Canaanites were doing. Ve'isha sheyikach et achoto, bat aviv, and a man who takes his sister, bat aviv, whether it is the daughter of his father, or bat ima, or the daughter of his mother, fara'ah et ervata, and has looked at her nakedness, vehi tir'eh et ervato, and she looks upon his nakedness, chesed hu. This is a disgrace. It's interesting because we do use the term chesed in the sense of mercy, but here in this context, it has a different meaning of disgrace. V'nichritu le'inei bnei amam, they shall be cut off from the sight of the people of their nation, right? Ervat achoto gila, he has revealed the nakedness of his sister. Avono isa, he shall bear his guilt. So let's go on here. So Rashi wants us to take a look at this word chesed, right? Lashon Arami, okay, in Aramaic, tarfa, chisuda. So it has to do, again, with this concept of obscenity, right? Or disgrace, disgrace. Umidrasho, and there is a midrash on it, okay? Im tilmar, should you say, Kain nasa achoto? Well, going all the way back, we know that Cain married his sister. Chesed asaha makom. At that point, the Holy One, makom, God, showed mercy, livnot olamo, in order to build up his world. Mimenu, from this particular relationship. So, right, circumstances alter cases. Shine Emar, as it says, interesting, Psalm 89, Olam chesed libaneh. The world is built up through mercy, right? Or kindness, right? That God showed a particular kindness to humanity in order to build up the world. And here they have a verse in Psalms that can be applied in this particular case, even though the general context, of course, is how true it is that the world is built up by kindness. So let me stop here. And we have more to go on all of this. Lots of ways in which people can try to gain sexual intimacy in ways that the Torah forbids. But anyway, we'll try and see how much we can get done next time. So I'm stopping the share. Any comments before we finish this session? Okay. All right. Harlan, did you want to say something?
I was just wondering about when a widow, when a person dies, and their brothers, and
Ah, yes, you're thinking of the levirate situation.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, that is a very specific situation where the brother has died without children. And you can see how that fits well with the interpretation we just gave with regards to Cain marrying his sister. I will tell you that, of course, within the Talmud and in the discussion, there is an opinion essentially. I think it's Abba Shaul who's the author of this opinion that says that should there be any thought of licentiousness involved on the part of the surviving brother having relations with his sister-in-law, it's forbidden. That the Torah wants the relationship to take place strictly with the idea of building up the deceased brother and not for any pleasurable or lascivious senses. I will tell you that this is not encouraged, right? It's there, it's allowed, it's there for a purpose, but if that purpose cannot be achieved, it is basically, I say that the default is against this particular one, precisely, Harlan, for the reason you mentioned, is that it contradicts the law of a man marrying his sister-in-law. So I'm glad you raised that. Thank you. I will stop with this.